Hello everybody, my name is Nick and this is LODE TV. As always, if this is your first time joining us, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel as well as check out LODE.one to learn more about how LODE is putting idle silver to work. And if you're already a member, welcome back. Now my guest today is Nick Giambruno, the Chief Analyst of the Casey Research's advisory, the Casey Report, as well as its Crisis Investing Advisory. Nick, thank you for joining us.
Great to be here with you, Nick.
Now, Nick, last week was incredibly volatile in the markets, and this week has been no different. We saw gold traded around $15.50, only to see a $55 intraday reversal after a series of Trump tweets on the China-US trade dispute. The Dow Jones closed 800 points down, its worst day of the year last Wednesday. We've seen weak economic data coming out of China, as well as the U.S. yield inverting for the first time in 12 years. What do you make of all this?
Well, I think you can expect more of this, more volatility and increasing volatility. As you correctly pointed out, everywhere you look in the world, something bad is happening. You look in Europe, there's trouble signs in Europe, there's trouble signs in Asia, there's trouble signs in South America. Argentina's currency just lost 25% of its value, and its stock market in dollar terms was about cut in half. So everywhere you look around the world, there are a lot of trouble areas, to say the least. So I expect this to continue, the volatility to continue. But I also would say I don't follow the day-to-day noise too much. I follow it, but I follow more. What I follow more are the big picture trends that are driving this volatility. So and I see those trends increasing until looks like we're heading towards a crisis on multiple levels. So there are factors that are driving these trends, and I just see them increasing on basically all fronts here that you just described.
So, given all of this, do you feel there's a way individuals and investors can play this volatility to their advantage?
It's very tough. I mean, to be an investor in this environment is extremely tough. Just look at what central banks are doing. And, I have to say, they often are referred to in the media as policymakers or central bankers or so forth. But what are they really? They're really just central planners. They're planning interest rates. And interest rates are no different than any other product in the marketplace. Interest rates are simply actually, they are different. They're more important than many other products in the marketplace. Interest rates are simply the price of money. And when you manipulate the price of money, you're manipulating basically half of every transaction out there, because you're manipulating money itself. So that is pumping unfathomable amount of distortions into the market. And it's really hard to be an investor in that environment when there's that much manipulation, this many distortions. So I actually prefer to be a speculator in this environment, which is somebody who takes advantage of these distortions, because it's like, as you mentioned, it's very hard to invest properly when you have this kind of interference and distortions in the marketplace. So I prefer to be
And with all this manipulation in the market, do you feel there's one specific area that investors and individuals should be focusing on?
I read a lot about gold and precious metals. And so I think that is an area that should be on people's radar for sure, not just on people's radar. They should be actively looking into this space and investing in this space, because gold it's kind of like if you want to short government stupidity, you go long gold. And going long gold, because gold is really just money, and people have forgotten about this. It has been money for thousands of years. It's not something that can be easily manipulated, like interest rates or fiat money. And I see a lot of trends pointing towards a higher gold price. So I would look at that. I would also look at cryptocurrencies, and in particular Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has a lot of the same features as gold, and it's kind of this new emerging, I call it a crisis currency. And with all these crises on the horizon, it's a good thing to look at too.
I'm glad you brought up Bitcoin. We'll be talking about Bitcoin in a little bit, but I'm also glad that you brought up the fact that gold and silver has been used as money historically throughout much of the world's history. And recently in precious metals, we've seen quite the bull run for gold especially. How long do you see this trend continuing?
I put out a piece earlier this year, actually in May, about 8 reasons why I think gold is being remonetized, and that a huge new gold bull market is on the horizon. And we've seen what's happened to gold since then. And so what I don't just see a garden variety gold bull market, like a cyclical gold bull market. What I see, and all the signs are pointing to, is that gold is being remonetized in the global financial system. Um, for the first time since the 70s, when it was officially demonetized. So that is a very, very powerful trend underneath gold that is unlike, I think, anything we've seen in previous gold bull markets. So where is it going to go? Nobody knows, but I think it's going higher in the months and years ahead.
So you've spoken about gold quite a bit, but what about silver? Do you feel that this bullish gold market will drag silver up with it?
Well, silver is more of an industrial metal, obviously, than gold. Gold is primarily a monetary metal. So, that might, I do see gold bringing up silver for sure. Silver is a much tinier market than gold. It's about 1/10 the size of the gold market. So moves, just what would not move the gold market could totally disrupt the silver market in terms of money flowing into it. So yes, I see people panicking into precious metals during a crisis, particularly a monetary crisis, which I think we're looking at here with all of the money printing, all of the debt, all of the deficits. That is going to cause people to go into precious metals, and of course, they're going to go into silver, which is, as I mentioned, is a tiny market. So I definitely see and bullish on silver. I would caveat that slightly by saying silver is not what I don't necessarily like about silver as much is that it's more of a industrial metal than a monetary metal. So that means it's susceptible to economic downturns and slowdowns and this kind of stuff. So um, I, 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 I do see a big spike in silver coming because of that because of its monetary use and people flooding into the precious metals for the protection from currency debasement. At the same time, I would look to get out before and maybe we don't know how the sequence is going to happen. So I am cautiously bullish on silver.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear you say such positive things about silver, given the fact that the LODE project does have its foundations in silver. But switching over to cryptos now, you called Bitcoin a little bit earlier a crisis currency. Given this statement, would it be safe to say that you believe that Bitcoin is a true portfolio diversifier?
Yes, but Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are a completely new animal, a completely new asset class, and we're only starting to figure out how they fit into everything. But I view them, Bitcoin in particular, I've called it a crisis currency, and I think you see that in many countries that are going through crises. For example, you see it in Argentina, you see it in Venezuela, where these countries have huge amounts of inflation. Bitcoin provides sort of an escape hatch for these people because it's not controlled by anybody. It's totally decentralized around the world. There's not one central point of failure. So I think Bitcoin is a wonderful thing for this kind of environment where we're going to see many more crises, and in particular many more monetary crises, because these central banks around the world are more than doubling down on the money printing that they've engaged in the past 10 years, and it's going to get much worse in that regard. So it's going to be a great environment for precious metals and a great environment for cryptocurrencies. And one aspect of this that I'm particularly interested in and excited about is the marriage between cryptocurrencies and precious metals. I think these two asset classes have huge amounts of synergy. In other words, the whole is worth much more than the sum of their parts. So being able to, when you have cryptocurrencies that are effectively backed by something like a precious metal, you take the aspects and attributes that make each attractive, and you combine them into something that is even more powerful than both of them. So I think this is still something that's in its infancy, but definitely something to watch, because you can basically, with cryptocurrencies backed by precious metals, you can effectively, anybody with a cell phone can use gold, silver, and other commodities, but in particular these precious metals in a way that was not possible even a few years ago. So I think this has enormous possibilities, especially for people in the third world who have these crappy currencies that lose value and go to zero on a regular basis. This gives anybody with a cell phone the ability to use gold and silver as money. So I think this is a huge, actually revolutionary part of the market. Still in its infancy, but definitely something to watch.
Again, I'm very happy to hear your opinions on this, as the LODE system really is all about the marriage of blockchain technology and precious metals. Now, one more comment on cryptocurrencies. We saw Bitcoin specifically trading from around 9,500 all the way up to 12,000 and then back down again. So it's been another volatile week in the market for Bitcoin. What do you make of this price action?
I don't get too hung up on the day-to-day price movements of Bitcoin or really anything else. My investing and speculating style is to focus on the trends, underlying fundamentals that drive these things. So when I look at Bitcoin in particular, the fundamentals are getting better. You have the hash rates going up, which means in plain English, the network is more secure. You're having all this institutional money come in. But more importantly, it's being proven and more accepted as money around the world and as a store of value. That is hugely bullish for Bitcoin and the whole crypto ecosystem as a whole. So you see adoption going up in these countries that I mentioned: Argentina, Venezuela. Anywhere where there is a crisis, you see Bitcoin adoption and use go up. So I think I see the fundamentals as painting a particularly bullish picture for Bitcoin and the whole crypto ecosystem.
All right, Nick, last question for today. Again, super grateful that you could join us. Given the fact that the U.S. yield curve has inverted for the first time in 12 years, and additionally the 30-year Treasury yield has dropped below 2%, do you believe an economic recession is inbound for the United States of America?
Oh, certainly. I mean, if you look just last month, the U.S. Economy officially had the longest expansion it's ever had in its entire history, meaning it hasn't had a recession for the longest time in its entire history. So this is if you believe the GDP numbers, which I think are crooked, because, for example, GDP includes government spending. So if the government pays people to dig a hole and fill it up again, well, that's positive for GDP. I think that's a bunch of malarkey. But that being said, it's been officially the longest expansion in the U.S. economic history as measured by GDP. So it's long overdue for even a cyclical recession to come in the U.S. Never mind any sort of serious crisis. We're just talking about a cyclical recession that's overdue. But I think something even more serious than a cyclical recession is in the cards. Because if you look at all of these distortions that are being pumped into the market, they're going to be wound out eventually. I mean, that is, if you look at Austrian economics, that shows you that these distortions, these malinvestments, eventually do get unwound. And I think we're going to see that in the not so distant future.
All right, Nick, that's all we have for today. Thank you again and take care.
Thank you for having me on.
That's all we have for today's interview with Nick Giambruno, the Chief Analyst for the Casey Report. As always, if this is your first time joining us, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel, as well as check out LODE.one to learn more about how LODE is putting idle silver to work. That's all for today, guys, and take care.